How do you check with that? I love this.
Where's that?
Betty, Marie, y'all hear us okay? Great, good to see you guys. Let us get this party started. Got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Couple of housekeeping things. For those of you who weren't with us last week, I'm going to make the same announcement I did then, today, and then I won't make it again, which is for this class, all the classes that I do normally at this time are in a hybrid format. So we have in person, we have our guests through Zoom, and they are all streamed to YouTube, which is where it is recorded. So please be mindful that anything we can say can and will be used. I don't have an issue with that. I don't. I just want you to know that it's being recorded. And from the heads of these people forward are those who are on the camera. And then those of you who are on the Zoom, if you keep your camera on, you get seen. If you don't get seen. Let's see, what else? And that's a housekeeping thing. Also, slight change to the schedule for next week. I had tried to secure 2 different professors to academic professors to come and be with us next week. Both of them ended up not being able to make it, so I apologize for that. And it's okay. As I prepared for last week and as I was preparing for this week, it occurred to me, one of the things that I like to do in classes like this is have what I call a mission laboratory. So next week, we're going to do what I call a laboratory, and under the theme of show and tell. I am going to bring a lot of things to show, to tell you about a little bit, and in the laboratory, you guys are going to engage them in different ways. One of the things that I haven't structured it yet, but one of the things I'm thinking about doing is bringing a sample of the Bluebonnet curriculum, which is the official curriculum for the state of Texas, and have y'all go through in a group setting, a small group setting, have you go through the curriculum yourselves and to think through it, both from a student perspective, a teacher perspective, a parent perspective, and your own perspective as a member of Hope Presbyterian Church. Okay. But I have a whole bunch of other show and tell to bring y'all next week as well. Part of it is last week and today, there's a fair bit of things in which I am presenting and I'm going to be bringing for you. Next week, I want to provide you that I'm not just making this up. Okay. I want to show you some of the things we talked about last week, things we're going to talk about today. This is what it looks like in reality. And I want to bring some of that for you next week. That's some housekeeping thing. Anybody else have any housekeeping? No? Yes.
I'll put on my generation to generation hat. We're inviting you to a lunch and learn the last Wednesday of this month, January 28th at noon in the NPR. Lunch is compliments of the G2G committee. And it's to talk about your financial planning and give you tools for you and your family, which might include a 529 for education.
Okay, thank you. And as a reminder, this class is a class that is sponsored by a grant through Generation to Generation, which I added on the front, a note about that on the front cover. Yes, ma'am.
Today's handout, an extra one.
Yes. Thank you. That was the next housekeeping thing also, which is I am today you'll need a pen. So I passed out a bunch of pens. For those of you in the back who need more stability, there's a few seats left up there at the tables if you need it. If not, I can pass out books for you to write on. Sure, let's write on the Bible. If you'll pass those back. If y'all need a steady thing to write on. We're gonna do fill in the blank lecture today, and we're gonna see how that goes, okay? All right, let's do some introductions. Emily, we're gonna start with you, and we're gonna work our way down to Susan, up to Mary, over to Marcelo, to Michelle, and we're gonna finish with Joan and me. And your question is, what is your name? And what was the name of your elementary school mascot?
Emily Hobby. We didn't have one. I'm so old. You said Google it. And the school district doesn't even have a website that will come up. But
Fair
in my
enough.
school, we're the Panthers.
All right, I'll accept that. Yes, ma'am.
Nancy Ryder, and I'm also old, and at my elementary school knew nothing about having a mascot. My high school was the first one, and we were the Red Men.
Okay.
Politically incorrect.
Wow. Be the Warriors.
Okay, I'm Karen McElhaney, and I, 3 for 3, my elementary school did not have a mascot. My sisters, of course, I'm texting here, my sister says when her kids went there, it was the Bulldogs, and the website now says it's the Lions.
Okay.
We didn't have.
Wow, that's some deep roots right there. Ken.
Ken Whiteside, 4 for 4, no mascot. When I went there, I just looked it up online and they are now known as the Hawks.
Okay, the Hawks, good.
Linda Whiteside, and we were the Dandy Rogers Panthers.
Okay, Panthers, good.
Susan McGregor, 5 for 6. No mascot, but I just looked it up. The Chargers.
Hey.
Okay,
Mary Zimmerman, and I don't think we had a mascot when I was there, but now they're Cougars from Norfolk, Virginia.
okay, good.
Carol Lowe, McKinney Hills in Maryland. I had to look it up. They said a giraffe, which doesn't sound good.
Oh, I didn't even.
Who would question it though?
It's the brontosaurus of the savannah.
It's a mighty kick. Giraffes have a mighty kick.
Very
Okay,
large. and
Joe.
Schultz. We did not have a mascot and I looked it up and the school doesn't exist anymore.
Had an mascot.
Yeah, if they had a mascot, it'd be around.
Yeah, we went to 10 elementaries that had the ocelot first and then the leopard.
Ocelot and leopards.
I'm Carol Longoria. I went to St. Margaret Mary's in San Antonio and it was named after Margaret Mary Alico. So ours was Alico, but it's not really a thing. It was her last name.
Okay,
Stephen Mendoza, back when I went in the early to mid 70s, no formal mascots. We adopted the high school one, which was the owl.
the owl. Okay, how wise.
Alex Moore, the Highland Park Scotty Dogs. Highland Park Austin, not Dallas, but
Yeah, very different.
very different.
Marcelo, and I was homeschooled, so we were the fighting, I don't want to be here.
You win.
Go after him. Michelle Cooper, I think it was the Rockets at Mormon Elementary School, Davis Monthan Air Force Base, Tucson, Arizona.
Wow. Okay.
My name is Michael, and we were the Dartmouth Ducks.
Oh, okay.
You tell me that you went to Dartmouth.
My name is Mercy. We didn't have one, but later I found out it was antelope.
Antelope, okay,
Nice.
good.
Natalie Day, Ben Milam Elementary, I don't remember there being a mascot, but I looked it up and it's now an international academy and it has a coat of arms that you can't.
The Knights, we'll call it the Knights. Good.
Sure.
Joan Hetherington, it was the Lock Hill Elementary in Northside School District in San Antonio, and we were the Lions.
It's good. Let's go Marie, Kitty, and Betty.
Okay, I'm Marie, and ours did not have one at the time, and I just looked it up, and it's the Calico Cats.
Friends with the giraffes.
Okay, good. I bet y'all didn't stray.
My name is Kitty. We didn't have a mascot either when I went to Paramount Terrace in Amarillo. And I looked it up and all I got was a picture of a bear.
Okay, a bear. Good. Betty?
I went to two elementary schools. The first one, we were the Crockett Rockets, and then we were the Fannin Firecrackers.
Good. Pastor Josh, I had 4, Roadrunner, Leopards, Dragon, and Eagles.
Wow.
There you go.
Put it all together, you get a griffin.
Put it all together, you get a griffin. I love it. I love it. Let me get someone to open us in prayer today. Thanks, Alex. There's a prayer in the bulletin, the handout. This is what happens when I get to be your friend, you pick on you.
Holy God, we gather seeking truth and understanding. Quiet our distractions, soften our assumptions, and prepare us to hear what you would have us know. Be with us now. Amen.
Amen. Just a reminder, there are the 7 points of our class covenant, and I ask that we be mindful about those. And let's get started. So again, I was trying to go through the content and preparing for the day. I needed to write the lecture notes or the script. So for you, I have some fill in the blanks, and I will try to your sentences don't necessarily, they are in order. There'll be some gaps between sentences that I say and what's on there. When it comes to a part of the fill in the gap, I will emphasize the 2 words and make sure that you know how to fill those in appropriately. I hope it's helpful, and if it's not, I'm sure you'll send me an email. Last week we gave an overview of what we're going to do for these 9 weeks. We talked and gave a basic definition about Christian nationalism and how it is distinguished from the Christian faith. So what I want to start off with is asking you, anybody have like a short 1-sentence takeaway from last week in our conversation about Christian nationalism, about what it is and what it is not? Anybody have a reflection this week or a short 1-sentence idea about what Christian nationalism is and what it isn't? Yeah, Michael.
It is the belief that America is a Christian nation, and true full citizenship and enactment of American ideals is Christian enactment of ideals, and it's seeping its way into our school curriculum.
Okay, great. What else? Anybody have any reflections on last week that occur to you at any point during the course of the week?
Did you get him to repeat his math? It was, he did a good job. It was very succinct.
Clearly, he did a good job. I didn't. All right, come on. Say it again.
Yeah, it's the idea that American ideals are exclusively Christian ideals, and that, well, I mean, I can't verbatim say what I said again, but like it's seeping its way into our schools. Yeah.
Good. All right, so let's get started. Your first fill in the blank. Christian nationalism is the belief that America is a Christian nation and that laws, policies, and institutions should reflect a specific version of Christian identity and values. Today, what we want to do is to understand how this movement of Christian nationalism was built. Christian nationalism was not and did not simply appear overnight. It may be a term that we've all come to understand in some way in the last 5 or so years, or 5 to 10 years, but it is not something that appeared overnight. It was not a grassroots uprising of concerned parents or faithful Christians acting spontaneously. Y'all may remember 2008-ish, we had the emergence of the Tea Party, right? That was kind of a spontaneous gathering, uprising of folks. That's not what Christian nationalism is. Christian nationalism was constructed deliberately over decades by leaders who understood that political power requires organization, money, and a long-term strategy. Organization, money, and a long-term strategy. Today, I'm going to frame a lot of my reflections based on the book that I led last summer called The Power Worshippers: Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism by Catherine Stewart. I do recommend it. It is not solely focused on education. It is a historical overview and implications of the Christian nationalism movement through her work as a journalist who spent many years tracking the movement, following the money, and naming the networks of powers and the individuals that drive that movement. The Christian nationalism movement that we see today began to take legitimate formalization in the late 70s and definitely in the 80s. President Ronald Reagan was, I would not call him a patsy or a useful idiot. He was a timely instrument for the power of the Christian nationalism movement that began in the late 80s. And that movement brought together wealthy donors, savvy political operatives, and religious leaders who saw an opportunity to reshape American politics and cultures. These people who were there at its inception were not fringe figures. These are people who were well-funded, they were well-connected, and who built an infrastructure of think tanks, legal advocacy groups, media outlets, and political action committees. From the late 70s, they played the long game. Okay? Some of y'all may know Falwell was a part of that, and that's just the name initially that comes off. Bob Jones. Why am I forgetting the Lynchburg guy? That is Falwell. What's that?
Dobson.
Falwell. Did I say Falwell?
Yeah.
Did I? I can't remember. I don't remember these things. All right.
Dobson of Focus on the Family.
Focus on the Family. These are all things that really and I'm going to cover this in a minute, but this last year during the election cycle, we heard about Project 2025. Are y'all familiar with that? Well, that 900-page document is a telling strategic plan similar to how this all got started in its current inception in the late 70s. This is not, again, spontaneous, deliberate, incredibly well-funded, long game. The movement organized around key issues. Those issues are opposition to abortion, defense of traditional gender roles. Anybody have an idea what those gender roles might be?
Male.
Well, of course, yes, male and one male, one
In the
male.
workhouse, female, and in the
Women stay
workplace,
home.
women at the home.
Patriarchal.
Yes, patriarchal. The man is the provider and the spiritual leader of the house and in society. Women should know their place in the kitchen. Traditional gender roles, resistance to LGBTQ rights, and control of education. Underneath these issues was a deeper agenda to establish a Christian identity as the foundation of American law and culture. Like that's the mission statement. How do we take Christian identity as the foundation for American law and culture? And if we keep saying the same thing, that mission over and over and over again, then in generations, we have people who say in 2025, 2026, America has always been a Christian nation. This has always been on the forefront. So what looks like a spontaneous reaction to cultural change is actually the result of a coordinated, well-funded organizing. The movement built the infrastructure to sustain itself over decades, and education was always central to the strategy. Understanding this history helps us to see what we are up against. When we hear politicians or activists talk about parental rights, religious freedom, or protecting children, that should cause us to pause and ask, who is funding this message? What organizations are behind it? And what is the real goal? Some of that I'm going to bring forward next week with show and tell. But these are critical thinking questions that we should be deploying when we are hearing these messages about parental rights, religious freedom, and protecting children. Each of those three have their own sort of hypocrisy built into them. We want parental rights, they would say, so long as it's our specific kind of parental rights. We want religious freedom so long as the other non-Christian religions stay in check. And we want to protect our children, but see the first point about parental rights. We want our children to be protected the way that we say they should be protected. And it doesn't matter how you may feel in your own parental rights and freedom, if it's not in alignment with what we're saying you should be thinking it is. For Christian nationalists, public education is both a threat and an opportunity. Why might it be a threat, anybody? Why might public education be a threat to their goals? Carol.
Because we're not able to control all the time what's being taught.
There it is. There's one. Good. What else?
You might teach my baby something I don't want them to know.
It might be possible. What else?
My baby's going to be exposed to people outside their experience that challenge.
Yes. It is a threat because public schools teach pluralism, science, and critical thinking. Yes. I gasped. I get it. Public schools serve all children, regardless of race, of creed, of background, economic background. They serve all children, not just Christian children. Public schools operate under a democratic oversight, not under the thumb of the church or by an authoritative Christian man, white man authority. They cannot promote one religion over others, public schools. Public schools teach secular knowledge and encourage students to ask questions. These are threats to Christian nationalism and the Christian nationalism goals and mission. It is an opportunity. How? How might it be an opportunity?
Captive audience.
Captive audience. Love it. What else?
Indoctrination.
Generational indoctrination. Good.
Permission to exclude.
Permission to exclude. Control. If you can control what children learn, you can control what kind of adults they become generationally. If you can control schools, you can control the future. This next little bit doesn't have fill in the blanks. I want to talk about Trump's first term with Betsy DeVos. Okay. In that book that Catherine Stewart wrote, Power Worshippers, she devotes a significant attention to the movement's education agenda, particularly through figures like Betsy DeVos, who served as Secretary of Education under Trump's first term. Anyone know our current Secretary of Education?
Betsy. Yes.
Not Betsy DeVos.
She's a
Linda
WWE president, right?
Yes, the one who was the president of World Wrestling Entertainment.
You gotta be kidding.
Linda McMahon. Here's a memo. It's been 13 months. Linda McMahon.
Excited about A1.
Yeah, you were.
She had famously, infamously, at the beginning of the year in an educational speech and forum, talked about how important A1 is going to be in the lives of our children going forward. What she meant was AI.
It took 2 Corinthians to explain that to her.
It took 2 Corinthians to explain that to her. Yes, that's a great joke. That's reaching back to the first term. That's a good one. The goal of Betsy DeVos in the first term is not only the inaugural goal of Linda McMahon in this term, but it is also what has come to pass. It did not come to pass in the first, what has now come to pass in the first 12 months of this term. Betsy DeVos was not just a political appointee, she was a longtime funder and architect of the Christian nationalism movement against education and that strategy. Her family has poured millions of dollars into Christian nationalist causes, including efforts to privatize public education. In her book, Stewart writes, "The real goal of the DeVos education agenda, as of the larger movement she represents, is not to improve schools, but to replace them with a private system subsidized by public money." This is critical to understand. It is both to control any and every aspect within the public educational system so that it aligns with the ideals of Christian nationalism on one hand, and on the other hand, concurrently parallel at the same time to eradicate or to dismantle public education altogether. Okay, it's a both and. This is critical. The movement promotes, Christian nationalism promotes voucher programs, education savings accounts, and charter schools. Their language is about choice and freedom, but the goal is to dismantle public education and to redirect tax dollars from private religious institutions. One of the things that it just came up in the last month is about the education savings accounts. Now, we've had an education savings account for higher ed for a long time, and that's not what we're talking about. If you look at the announcement in, I think it was in December, it was the Dell Foundation who is working with the Department of Education and Trump and establishing these education savings accounts. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars from Dell to this program so that it can accomplish these goals. 600 million.
Guys, there's a program the end of this month on a Sunday at the Bullitt Museum to educate parents how to access the new Texas money for their children's education. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes, I have not, but if you can get me a link or a flyer, please do, and I'll share it with everybody. Not my encouragement to go, but again, show and tell. That's what I want to do next week. So if you can give me that, I appreciate that. Again, it's how can we control everything within it while trying to dismantle it at the same time. The voucher programs did not come to be in the first term, and now they have come to be, at least here in Texas and other states. What is taught in the classroom, not as successful in the first term, has already come to be in the second term. Oklahoma being a great example of that, which I don't need to go down the rabbit trail of, but in short, the state board commissioner in Oklahoma in the spring had not only said that all teachers would need to take what I would call a loyalty test to the Trump MAGA brand, but also spent the taxpayer money to ensure that the Trump Bible was in all classrooms in the state of Oklahoma. He resigned, I think it was in August, and has gone off to go do something else, probably behind the scenes in this movement. So I don't know whether or not the Bible thing came to fruition. If they're still in the classrooms, I don't know. The the litmus test for Christian nationalist loyalty, and even though it wasn't called that, basically what he had said was, we don't want California liberals coming in and teaching Oklahoma students. And if you're not aligned with our ideals, you're not going to get hired or get your license. It's coming to be. In the book, Stewart notes that the objective is to transfer wealth from the public sector to the private sector and to advance a religious and ideological agenda under the guise of educational freedom. Back to the fill in the blanks. The agenda goes beyond funding. Christian nationalists also target curriculum. They push to remove books. They push to censor discussions of race and gender and mandate Bible instruction in the class. There was a class that my son took in 8th grade at Canyon Vista Middle School. This just a few years ago. And I believe, to my knowledge, there was only one of 2 schools in Round Rock ISD that were teaching it, as the state of Texas has now outlawed it, banned it, whatever you want to call it. And it was simply on, it was basically Texas had an issue with it because it was a DEI class, and it was focused on African-American ethics and history, which is great for an 8th grader to take, I think. Only 11 students were in the class, and I tried to ensure that he understood you are one of less than 30 people in the entirety of this district who has this class and may be the last that get to have it at this school or in this district or in this state. And so it is removing of classes like that. We see in Texas that school boards are banning books. Legislators this last session passed a law requiring the posting of the 10 Commandments in classrooms. Parents are showing up at board meetings demanding that schools teach a Christian version of American history. In her book, Power Worshiper Stewart explains that the culture war over education is not really about parental rights. It is about whose version of America gets taught to the next generation. And I would say it is about power, that this movement is about power. The first class I took in college was called Who Owns the Past? And it was a semester-long course of a critical thinking course, an examination of how history gets written and by whom, and how power plays an impact on that, and that the history that's recorded dictates generationally who owns the past, even if it's not the right history or historically accurate history. For a good book on that, I would say there's a book called Forget the Alamo as a great example of studying true history, historically accurate history of the Alamo, juxtaposed to what is literally printed on the walls at the Museum of the Alamo. Having read that book, studied that book, that history, and then going to the Alamo and looking at the placards and reading the story, it was so unnerving to say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and yet that is the story.
And Dan Patrick prohibited the author of that book to speak at the Bulletin Museum.
That's correct. Why? Because we don't necessarily need to have the historical accurate nature of that to be preserved and shared. All of that research was done and is available for those who have permission to access it at the historical records at Texas A&M, which is where the research of this book came from. It's a fabulous book. It is about power. Christian nationalists want schools that reflect their values, promote their theology, and prepare children to see America as a Christian nation. What is at stake? Education is not a side issue for this movement. It is central to everything they hope to achieve. If they can weaken public schools, they can weaken the common good. This is why fights over schools feel so intense. They are not just about one book or one lesson plan. They are about who gets to shape the next generation and what kind of country we will become. As people of faith, we have to ask these questions. What does it mean to love our neighbors juxtaposed to this movement and in this moment in time? And what does faithful witness look like when public education is under attack? I'm putting four statements forward that I think is true for the members of this community, Hope Presbyterian Church. 1, we believe every child deserves access to quality education. I think that's a value that we can all share here. 2, we believe that public schools serve the common good of our society. 3, we believe pluralism is not a threat, but a gift. And 4, we believe democracy requires an educated citizenry.
Yeah.
The idea back to pluralism and having the curiosity and not the insecurity of your faith, but the curiosity about learning about other faiths. Alex and I were in a small group last night, and it was an incredibly diverse body. It was great. There were historical, cultural Catholics, cultural Lutherans, two former Catholics, 2 former Lutherans, 2 current Hindus, and 2 Presbyterians, and a partridge in a pear tree. It was a cool little group. And after spending a few hours together, we concluded the night by the Hindus and the former Catholics saying, what does it mean to be Presbyterian? And how does this Christian tree work? And how is it different from, there is not an insecurity about who they are and what they are. There is a curiosity about pluralistic ideas, getting to know the other. Does this make sense? We in the Christian nationalist movement don't want that to be understood in our classrooms. Okay, so those 4 statements are things that I think are true for this community of Hope Presbyterian Church. I think it's true on a much larger level for many who profess Christianity as their faith that are not a part of the Christian nationalism movement. I think many of them would. I'm at least just speaking for Hope Presbyterian Church. Christian nationalism offers a different vision than that. It wants schools that serve one faith, one worldview, one version of America. That is not faithful witness. That is the pursuit of power. And we have to be clear about what we are seeing. I think it's important that we name it and that we have to decide how it is that we are going to respond to it, which is the foundational element of this class. I am doing a miniature show and tell right now, and I'm giving you three citations there. I included them, right? Yep. I'm giving you 3 citations there of documents that are available for you to find on the internet. Okay, I'm not going to go through them right now. The National Council on Biblical Curriculum in Public Schools. This has been around a long time. This is a great example of well-funded, well-organized, long game strategy from this movement about Christian nationalism in our public schools, specifically centered around the King James Bible, as they say, is the foundation document of our society. And my friends, I love you, but I cannot embrace that or explain enough how much the King James version of the Bible, as pretty as it may sound at a funeral, and I'll never begrudge that, is not a foundational document for society. That's all I'm going to say about that. In that document, Attacking Pluralism, it says, don't be misled by politically correct religion courses, blah, 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 blah. Talks about that. The next one there is a report and analysis on religious freedom, measures impacting prayer and faith in America. That's a fascinating read. I was in the library at a middle school in Round Rock ISD just a couple of weeks ago for a presentation. And what you can't miss on this wall, this one wall where there's no other art, is this placard about this big that just simply says, "In God we trust." Right? There's a big old mural over here, and there's this, that, and the other, and there's learn to read and all that. But right there in the center of this is this placard, "In God we trust." The document offers strategies for mandating that that placard is there, is being displayed. And there it was. And I had to sit there and ask those questions I mentioned earlier. Who funded this? What is the goal of having it there? I'm sitting there thinking about the students who are there, who are trying to learn under this. Yes, of course, it's on all of our cash and all this, that, and the other, but this is a different space in the library. You can read more about that. And then finally, Project 2025. It's a 900-page document. It is long. I have not read it, but I read the education section, and be happy to send you a PDF of just the education section if you so desire. It truly is pulling back the curtains. I ain't got nothing to hide. This is the plan. And if you read it today, unlike when it was written 2 years ago, you can begin seeing how the checklist has begun being checked off. It talks about the woke diversicrats and calls for protecting faith-based institutions, et cetera, on school choice and privatization. Ultimately, every parent should have the option to direct his or her child's share of education through education savings account. Thank you, Dell family. Funded overwhelmingly by state and local taxpayers, which would empower parents to choose a set of education options that meet their child's unique needs. Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the federal Department of Education should be what? Eliminated. We're not hiding it, they're saying. This is the plan. This is the playbook, and we're going to do it. And we have accomplished a lot of it already. I think it is important for us, if we hold those ideas that those values, that we believe that public education is for the common good, serves the common good, every child deserves quality education, and that democracy requires an educated citizenry, then we can't not know about the playbook that they have published online in the Christian nationalism movement and what they're trying to accomplish, and that voting matters and makes a difference for your school boards, especially, but definitely whoever's going to be at the top. Your Texas Education Agency commissioners, those matter. What they are bringing to your ballot without doing our research about which thing they're trying to accomplish matters. Skipping, I don't know any of these people, so I'm just going to skip that, matters. And I say all that with fear and trembling, because I know Ken, who served on TEA for so long, I value you, and I don't want to get myself in trouble. And I hope that what I said is right. Okay. All right. So now I want to catch our breath for a second. Okay. I want you to hold all that intention. Just park it for now. And I want to juxtapose it with some of our guests today. People who, and for right now, I only want to talk to folks who have served in public education or are currently serving in public education. And so that I may know who that is, I know Joan and Susan and Ken and Alex and Emily. Who else am I missing? Carol and Mary. Okay. So these next few questions and discussion bit is going to be, looking online. Yep. No. Okay, good. I just want to kind of hone in on y'all and be sure to speak up loud enough so that our friends can hear us as well. We've traced how Christian nationalism built itself as a political movement and why it has targeted public education so deliberately. So let's ground it in a lived experience. Several of y'all have taught or are still teaching in Texas public schools. Your perspectives will help us understand potentially what these debates actually mean for students, for teachers, for families who are navigating through them every day. So let's start with the simple one. And we don't have to hit everybody that I mentioned, but and we can just popcorn it as you so desire. Let's start with your experience as students, and I want to talk about you when you were a student, okay? Because we're gonna travel through time in your timeline. So I want you to think back to when you were a student and your own memories, whether it was in Texas or anywhere else. What messages did you receive, do you remember receiving as a student, either explicitly or implicitly, about the relationship between Christianity, American identity, and good citizenship? And what school rituals or practices stood out that you remember? I think I have that question in the bulletin.
You do.
I do? Okay, good. Does that make sense? Let's start with your memories and not jump ahead. What say y'all? What do y'all about the relationship between Christianity, American identity, and good citizenship? What do you remember? Yeah, Emily.
Say it was very much part of public education in New Jersey in the 1950s when I was there. You read the Bible, you always read Psalm from the King James Version. That was the only thing they had available. And it was a rote thing. Everybody had to take their turn. You heard, it was a good way to learn the 23rd Psalm. Everybody read it. It was also the time when Under God was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. And we stumbled over that too.
Good. So you remember that. You remember how it came to be that under God was added to the Pledge of Allegiance?
So no.
Okay. Thank you,
Long time ago.
Eisenhower, who was not a member of a Christian church, but professed to be a Christian as he began running for president. Filed for his membership at a Presbyterian church so that he could have it registered. And it was a movement of conservative evangelicals who came to him and lobbied for him to add under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. Hence, that was not originally a part of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm also going to say, my generation is considered boomers, and the generation before, although they're probably known as the greatest generation, your title is the silent generation. And Reeve and I were talking about that the other night. And maybe that's because they went along quietly with things that were rolling, because after the war, people were into peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting thing about who were the leaders then and who were the role models for those of us growing up.
Yeah. Well, I think there was also a significant trust in the institutions at that time. So, but what I heard you say was you did psalm reading from the Bible and stumbled over the new Pledge of Allegiance. Good.
The Jewish holidays.
And you got off all the Jewish holidays. Awesome. What else from people who were educators or are educated? Yes. Let me go with Susan first and come back to you, Ken.
I'd like to add that I lived in New Jersey for 3 decades, but I am a native Texan and chose to come back, and now I'm involved in the schools in Cedar Park. New Jersey no longer has biblical teachings. That's
right.
Now, when I was involved
when I was teaching in New Jersey in the 60s, it was gone.
So I think it's important to recognize that not only was that a different time, but we were a different nation.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were largely a white nation. That is no longer the case. Just wanted to say that. I think some of the things that have become even more important the last few years have taken place because those people who want to keep things in the dark ages are trying to take the power away from the way things have evolved.
Thank you. Ken, did you want to say something about what you remember when you were a youngster?
Just kind of off of what Susan just said. When we were young, here in the Jim Crow South, the Protestantism and public education and every institution were all intertwined, because the same white Protestant men who ran the churches, ran the schools, ran the businesses, ran everything. So there was, it was seamless.
Okay.
And, but I also know that all went away because of demographic shifts and I guess that's, to me, that's what's maybe at the root of the Christian nationalist movement is regaining, those folks wanting that power back and anyway.
Good, thank you. Other educators?
I have one incident that strikes in my memory. They were all separated. Citizenship was very much, good citizenship was you vote, you understood the Constitution and the three branches of government. You are an American, raw, but Christianity was completely separate. And this was driven home to me in 6th grade as I'm a cradle Presbyterian. We hit a point in my growing up that my group of peers in church were tired of the starting the school year with the creative theory. We've done it all through elementary school, we have to do something different. But in that, we were also added the historical context in which the Bible was set. So we asked, as we were studying history in school, where does this fit? And we asked at church. We did not ask at school, we asked at church. So when I got to school one day and we were talking about Judaism and the time of Christ and basically the Roman Empire, and I shared some of my things that I had learned at church, I got called to task the next day because the Jewish student in school went and talked to the teacher because I was sharing stuff that I wasn't supposed to know because I hadn't gone to synagogue with her. I wasn't supposed to know about the Roman occupation of Israel because I hadn't been in synagogue with her and did not know the Jewish perspective. And I was now in trouble in world history for it.
And just,
because it was so church and school were so separate.
And just for context, what city and roughly what half of a decade?
San Antonio, second half of the 70s.
Okay, perfect.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
In school, you learn the creation story?
No, at church.
She learned it.
Started out
Yeah.
in Sunday school. So my Presbyterian church, we did the creation story over and over and over again.
Misunderstood.
But when I hit middle school, we said, time out, because my mom happened to be our Sunday school teacher, but the minister's son said, we're done with creation. There's a whole different story there. But because of our experience growing together and studying with the same teachers, we didn't just hear God created, da, 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 da. We went into, when we got to the history of Jesus, we got into what was going on in that time period, the Roman occupation of Israel, why were the Romans there? We as a Sunday school class discussed that because
Inquiring minds want to know.
we wanted
Yeah,
to.
so
But because I learned that cultural background at church, but I wasn't at the synagogue with the Jewish student.
So I think part of what we see here is, and I really want to draw the contrast between, and not just because it's two different geographical locations of the Northeast and Texas, but from the 50s to the late 70s, two really kind of different extremes in the classroom at that point there. I'm going to write it down, hold on to it, Carol. Have you been in public education?
I've been in public education at the higher education level for 20 years.
Please. Yeah.
So the reason that struck me is that reminded me of something. So moving up to the decades, my oldest son went to school here in Austin and in 2nd grade, I remember he came home and he said, I had trouble at school today. I said, why did you get in trouble? Well, the teacher asked a question. She asked, what do you do at this time of the year for the holiday break? It was Christmas. So he raised his hand and said, we celebrate the birth of Jesus and we go to church. And he was an Amish at school. We don't talk about church things in school. And that really bothered him. Well, come to go through his backpack and he had an art project that was a menorah. And that just set me off. And so I wrote letters to all of the school board and I sent them a package and educated them about the history of the menorah and how that was religion and why were we doing art projects on that? But when my son was asked an open-ended question, he got in trouble. So we're either no religion or we're everybody's religion.
Yeah, I will just say that I had the same experience when my son was in kindergarten. And I had gone to the holiday party at the school, and on the bulletin board outside of his classroom was the whole, every student in the class had done a menorah. There was a wallpaper of menorahs. And I was like, what is this? And so, I mean, it was cool. I was glad that he got that, but
But not to
it didn't make sense. I knew that they could talk about Santa and they could talk about the Easter Bunny, but not about the other things. And at the time, across the street, where my wife was teaching, and to this day, no artifacts of any sort can be of Christian symbolism can be placed in there. If you choose to wear a cross, you choose to wear a cross, but you cannot have it on the wall. You can't have it on your desk. You can't have Psalms. You're gonna have the little cherubs. What was the little Hallmark figurines? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, the little angels. Yeah, the little angels, whatever they are. Nothing, or you get written up. Did you want to say anything? Are you good, Alex? I'm gonna move on. Let's look at number 2, perspective shift over time. And I think we begin to see that, right? From the 50s and Northeast and the late 70s and perspective in the 90s and 2000s. For you educators specifically, looking back, especially given what we've discussed about Christian nationalism as a political movement, how do you think about those experiences differently? Which messages or practices feel sustaining and which feel more complicated or a troubling thing? Yeah,
I'll say from I started elementary school in the 80s, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance. And then I started teaching in the mid 2000s, and unbeknownst to me, we were now saying the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge and having a minute of silence for unguided reflection / prayer. So we weren't told what to say for the prayer or anything, but we were now saying 2 different pledges to 2 different flags, which I found and still find confusing.
And having a moment of silence.
And then a moment of silence after that for, I think the minute of silence is the official guidance. Yeah.
I'll just, as a student experience myself, I always felt odd to go from the rituals that I knew from church into the rituals of society. And I remember thinking, why doesn't everyone say amen at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance? I just remember thinking, well, these are the rituals I'm familiar with. And then we have these societal rituals, and I didn't make the leap in my head. And there was a confusion of rituals and purposes in that regard. For our educators, anybody else who have served in public education? Yes, sir.
I am currently a teacher. This is my second career. I've been teaching now. This is my 11th year. Teach, thankfully, math. So it's numbers and I don't get caught in all.
And can you say where?
I'm sorry.
Can you say where you teach?
Oh, I'm in Pflugerville ISD.
Okay, great.
Yep. So I teach eighth grade math and algebra for the last 11 years. So
now you guys know who to call for a tutor.
But just so I like it for the fact that the numbers don't lie. So I'm so thankful for that. I don't have to get caught in things. But I think it's interesting from the perspective, good, bad, or indifferent, people are getting messaging at lightning speed now, obviously due to internet and the technology we have, as opposed to 30, 40, 50 years ago. So you can have, just like anything, the internet can be used for good or bad. And so there's a lot of messages that are getting out so much quicker than they would have been in the 50s or 60s. I mean, I grew up as a student in the 70s and 80s. So just a thought.
Yeah, thank you. Let's do 2 more on that question about shifting perspectives. Yeah, Susan.
On the question of which does this feel sustaining? and which feel more complicated. As a person who is educated in Texas but raised her children in the state of New Jersey, there was a wonderful class that both my children got to take. That was an AP class on understanding world religions. Now, based on Ken Paxton's lawsuit against Leander and Round Rock for not posting the 10 Commandments, I believe that we cannot have a class like that. That was one of the most broadening, wonderful classes for my children. They were raised in a Presbyterian church. They're still very faith-based, but they got to experience that class.
Good, thank you, Carol.
I guess my contrast is, I don't know whether it's generational or where I came from. So I'm mostly talking about Maryland and having been a student there and having been a teacher there, and then coming 30 years ago to Texas and finding some shocking differences, mostly in that Montgomery County, Maryland was very progressive, is very inclusive. It was very including of all, like we had Kwanzaa early on, so everybody could have a holiday. I don't know what that was all about, but the changes and when I wanted to say, oh, well, we were already doing things about inclusion and different learning styles and so forth. My district in Texas really didn't want to hear about it. And so I found the changes, and I don't usually say it very much because I spent a lot of time teaching in Texas as well. But there were definitely differences. And that may be about ages, but I think it was more about location.
Yeah, about location, yeah. And let's finish up with you, Emily.
Share two personal experiences. Again, New Jersey, where I lived, where I grew up, and where I taught, it was a more diverse population, and it was a very more open-minded population. And I'll agree with Carol. It was a shock to come teach in Texas because what we started doing in the 90s here, I had already done in the 70s in New Jersey.
Wow.
But I had I want to talk about two experiences I had. I landed in gifted education here in Texas quite by chance, and I did it in December, and my students had to share a tradition, something that they celebrated in their family, and give the background of the tradition. And when I introduced the lesson, I can say the way you even celebrate the birthday, your birthdays in your family and things like that. And I did have one parent come, and we had people talk about Christmas. We had people talk about, I had one little Jewish boy talk about Hanukkah, and his mom, who I knew personally we were PTA friends and Cub Scout mothers together, come to me and say, she goes, that's a really good lesson. I think it would be better if you did something like that when there wasn't all this other holiday season going on. That was just a suggestion, but she came to me and we could have dialogue. So that was a benefit to me as an educator, to have a parent say, this is my perspective, very respectfully, and say, this is how I think it might work better for all the children. Then I had later on, fabulous little girl, Palak Shah, I think probably of Indian heredity. And kids give reports and they mimic things. And so Palak is reporting on some ancient civilization, and she gives the date such and such BC. My Scott jumps up, he goes, that's politically incorrect. You have to say BCE. I don't think Pollock even knew what BC meant. And the other kids are kind of going, what is this? So fortunately, the classroom climate was such I could say to these very bright children, this is what they're talking about. Some people keep the calendar this way, and because they don't want to do that, then Scott says we can say it's a common era because we've all lived. But it was I was, because of the freedom I had in my teaching situation at that time, it was a teachable moment for my children.
Yeah.
That way.
I love that, and I think that's I really like the reflection from the 70s, 90s, and you said, "Wow, I've already covered all this," or even the shift in something as simple as BC and AD versus CE and BC. Is anyone unfamiliar with CE and BCE? Unfamiliar? Okay, so BC and AD, BC being before Christ, and AD being two Latin terms, which is the year of the Lord, the year of the Lord, right? So we are in the 2026 AD in the year of the Lord, right? CE and BCE, this is Common Era and before the Common Era. I'm sorry, I put those backwards. That we are living in 2026 of CE in the Common Era. I didn't start using these until I went to seminary, and which made sense to me to intentionally, purposefully think a little bit more pluralistic. But I don't chagrin this either. Neil deGrasse Tyson, a astrophysicist and famed thinker, who is unequivocally an atheist, agnostic, I can't remember which one he is. He absolutely endorses the CD and AD. And his rationale for thinking that way is we live in history, and our calendar, the 12-month calendar, is a 12-month calendar that comes out of the Roman Empire. And it was the Roman Empire that we have this, and this is how we mark time. And I don't have a problem with how we mark time, especially acknowledging the ways in which our history has had its impact, not just in time, but in all these other things. So that was hopeful for me to say that I don't have a bone with either one. The point being is that how that gets taught, I honestly don't know whether or not Baron or Phoenix, my son, I honestly don't know that they know which of those. I've never talked to them about it. I will do that later today. For our I'm sure they do. For our public educators, last question. And Alex, I think you and Stephen might be some of our substitute or some of our current serving educators. As educators yourselves, how have you navigated, or how would you navigate the current climate around these Christian nationalist issues? What tensions do you experience between honoring your faith, respecting religious diversity, and managing political pressure on schools? And that's a big loaded question. That's why I printed it in the bulletin, the handout.
I kind of keep it simple in my class. Right outside my classroom, I have two things that I've stood by. I guess coming from the business and corporate world for so many years, and now being in education for 11 years, I tell my students to, one, do your best. And secondly, probably the most important one, be respectful. So we have to be respectful of everyone's understanding, their beliefs, their understanding of things. And I often kind of joke, but in a very serious way, I'll do this. I said, does anybody know what that means? I said, oh, that means money. I said, listen, if you do your best in life and you're respectful, you're going to be so successful. But I really push the ideal of being respectful. I'll say it again. I mean, I feel like it's easier because, again, being math, the numbers don't lie. Like I'm easily insulated with that. So
good. Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. If you can, I felt like I established in my classroom a feeling of mutual respect. And I grabbed a motto from the old 1-minute teacher that is, we are at our best when we are both students and teachers. So the kids and I were on it. I created an even playing for us, I hope. And I can remember my Ellen shouting out to the others, and we were studying Wrinkle in Time, and said to them, can't you understand that's a metaphor for a Christ figure? She was a strong Episcopalian. And the kids all, huh? And we took time to say, Ellen's bringing ideas from her background and her tradition, and we all bring ideas from where we are. And if we, and just as he said, teaching mutual respect and the ability to listen to the other, not fear the other.
But I thank you. And I mean, I don't know that I would disagree. I don't think that I disagree. Well, why is that? That's what I want to pressure you.
Tired. I mean, the pressures were just getting greater and greater, and I was not happy in that environment anymore.
Pressures were getting greater and greater. I appreciate that. Do you want to say something, Alex?
So as far as from the start of the class, or I guess I'm at my third school now. I used to only teach Spanish. Now I also teach computer science. But in Spanish, in my first two schools, most of the students, vast majority were Christian. And then there might be a few Jewish students and then a very small number of other students. And so with Spanish, a lot of the language, like the etymology, but also the culture and everything about it stems from this Catholic missionary spreading throughout all the world. And so there's a lot of interweaving those things, and I could expect students to understand things pretty quickly because they had lived that or they had been familiar with it. And so now when I'm explaining something at my school, most of the students are not Christian, very few are. And so it's a different shift in perspective of how can I like explaining it as not as a historical fact of why these things were named that way. And that Christians believe this. And the cool thing is that why do they believe that? And I can give like just a little bit of like, I think they believe it because, but also like other students are able to share similar things from their traditions or ask those kind of questions and to try to answer in a historical perspective way. Then I would say for the current climate, I do have students who share frustrations with things like how things are changing in schools, different rules and things like that. And I do my best to encourage them, if this bothers you, then you talk to your parents and you often work together to contact your school board members, your legislators, the government. So showing them like there is a path to making these changes happen, and I am not the person who can make that change. So trying to show them how they can affect the change. And then the last thing would just be that with the current law, like in terms of Project 2025, making itself in the classroom, this year, one of the laws from the legislature that got implemented this year was that students could not be, the law was to prevent students who were trying to become a different gender or transition to a different gender or present as a different gender to be called by those names. And the intent of the law was to stop that from happening. The letter of the law said no student may be called any nickname other than the first name on their attendance roster enrolled name without explicit parental permission, which meant we had, hundreds of students at our school who might have this first name, but they go by their middle name, or their first name might be Johnson and they want to be called John, and we can't call them anything other than Johnson until their parents fill out a specific form, send it to the school for that. But also if there were students who wanted to be who were trying to transition, and if the parents for any reason said, my student is transitioning, or my student acts like, or my student has said anything about their student transitioning, then the law said the school could not call them by that name anymore, and they couldn't change the student's name if they did happen to say why they were changing it and it was for that reason.
So are you saying that even if the parent said, my daughter is transitioning to Jane from John, the school still couldn't call her Jane? Is that what you're saying? Even with the parents' permission?
If they were transitioning from Jane to John and the parents said, we are transitioning, if they said, they mentioned transition or gender for any reason of the change, then they could not do that.
Wow.
And so
So it's interesting that they want parent choice when they want parent choice.
Yeah.
And then other times the parents don't get the choice.
And I wrote several emails to state
Right?
leaders with that it seems you're saying parent choice, but you are removing the choice of many parents in a way that will harm children.
Good, thank you. Susan?
I was just gonna say along these lines, this name thing is obviously anti-transgender. And it has been a very interesting year with that, because there are parents who don't want to know that their Charlotte has become Charlie. And then there are parents who are completely supportive of it. The teachers are caught in between. So the question is, how are the teachers managing political pressures on the schools? They've got Ken Paxton suing their school district. Their own salaries are going down with inflation going up. I'm an adjunct faculty. I'm trying to support the music educators I work with. But I see students getting hurt in this process. They are caught in between the teachers and the parents. I see teachers being caught in between the powers that be in the legislature and their students and serving the needs of their students and supplying their own families with a roof over their heads. It is time to take action.
Try being a substitute teacher. Your roster is also your attendance sheet. So I can only call them by their legal first name. So Gustavus Maximilian Smith, I can only call him Gustavus. But everybody else in class is calling him Gus. Okay, so I'm sitting in a middle school classroom, my roster is only with me for the first 10 minutes of class because I have to send it in for attendance purposes. Now I don't know if you're Jane, Joe, Bob, Max, Sally, Ali, Ahmed, Juan.
And that has a direct impact on whether or not the principal will allow you to come back to the school.
Exactly. Now can I come back because I used the wrong name for the child because I happen to think the child looked like John to me that I had 3 weeks ago in a different classroom, but no, his name is Ahmed.
Yeah.
Right. From the
Two more, Alex and then Mary.
The 30,000 foot view of this in relation to the trying to dismantle public education is that the increased regulations, restrictions, and things that teachers, the paperwork is the worst part of a teacher job.
So much paperwork.
The faith in having seen how contentious school board elections have gotten, is that the taxpayer faith in the school system is eroding because they see a bloated administration. But the bloated administration usually exists because of state level requirements of so much paperwork and regulations. And so the state is requiring districts to have all these people, but not increasing the funding for these people. And so the taxpayer, all they see is lots and lots of people in an office that are not directly impacting education and saying, well, why are we giving so much money to schools when we should have all these people while the state is actively forcing this upon them. And so all of it is to say that people are wanting to leave education as a job and people are wanting to stop funding education as taxpayers because of the way the state is purposefully changing the system.
Yeah, and I mean, for those of you who live in Leander ISD, this is case in point of its current crisis in Leander ISD and Round Rock ISD, but it has the real world impact on how we educate our students. And they are the ones who will suffer for that. We're gonna close with Mary and we're gonna move on.
I don't wanna take a lot of your time, but my career was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it's a liberal community because we've got the University of North Carolina there. And at the time, I taught at the only high school. Now there may be even 4, but now there are more than one high school. But I was hired to expand the home economics high school program because it was not doing well, and the teacher retired. And I was given free rein, and this was in the early 90s, to design my curriculum based on the state curriculum, but I could design it the way I wanted. And I designed a food and nutrition course that I called Foreign Cuisine. And I based it on watching PBS shows, just cooking shows that I loved to watch, and came up with projects from different countries and so forth. And I was given lots of funding for this to teach that curriculum and have all the supplies that I needed because I worked in a wealthy community that respected and wanted that for their kids. And as I worked, I retired from that same high school in 2010. And when I retired, I was glad to leave because it just kept getting harder and harder. The freedom I was offered at the beginning was so enticing and so wonderful to work with. And it didn't last. It gradually got worse and worse. And the people who hired me left, and new people came in with stricter concepts and ways of how things should be done. And they didn't have a clue who I was or how I had designed things or what gifts I brought to that job. And it was really time for me to leave because I couldn't take that freedom and keep getting denied parts of it as I went through the years. So I loved my job. I loved the students. But the management and the way education became so hard, and I felt it as a home economics teacher. Imagine with the English and social studies, and I mean it was hard to watch that happen in that community. And if it was happening that way in Chapel Hill, believe me, in other parts of North Carolina, it was far worse. Yeah.
Educators, thank you. I'm grateful for that. There is an insight that comes here, and being married to one, the term that I came across a few years ago, which makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it reflects some of what I'm hearing from the educators, is street level bureaucrats. That educators are street level bureaucrats with no power. Alex had mentioned.
Administrators.
Yeah, Alex was mentioning like they're street level in the sense that they're the only ones parents see, right, or engage with, and so you're the only one that I can complain to or express my frustrations. The unfortunate part is that many of the teachers are unable to reciprocate because they actually have no authority. The idea about the international cuisine, right? Well, I can't teach that anymore. Well, I want my kid. Well, I'm sorry, I can't. Don't be mad at me. I love the redirect, as you mentioned earlier, Alex, about, talk to your board of trustees, go to a school board meeting, et cetera, et cetera. I think would love for us to pull up a little bit higher, and we kind of ended with some of the frustrations that we're hearing and fearing, and I know we haven't even scratched the surface of frustrations, but you can already feel it. That's the long-term strategy of this movement. Make it miserable from within and try to get rid of it from without. You understand? And you're feeling it. You're feeling it. I'm glad I left at the time I did. You said I couldn't do it now. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. I don't know whether I'll get called back if I say the wrong thing. I have to abide by all of these things. I know that one of the things that legislator was talking about in the special session this last summer was, let's get rid of the STAR test for 3 smaller tests over the course of a year. I promise you that's 3 times as much paperwork. One of the rules I got passed is if your kid's going to participate in any kind of club, they have to fill out a form. That's a lot of form management. That is a lot of paperwork that the teachers have to administer, that the principal has to ensure that the teachers have administered.
Every book Baron has read this year, which right now is To Kill a Mockingbird. I have to
I've had to sign a form.
Okay,
I've had to sign a form on all of those as well. Yeah. Christian nationalism didn't emerge naturally from popular will. It was built deliberately, strategically, and with enormous resources. Wealthy donors, there's no more fill in the blank. This is my closing thoughts. Wealthy donors, political operatives, religious leaders constructed an infrastructure designed to reshape American society. There's a more formal name for it, and I can't remember what it's called right now. Catherine Stewart mentions it in her book. but it's the predecessor to Project 2025. It's the playbook. It's a literal playbook and strategy designed to reshape American society and to put Christian education at the center of that plan. They did this because they understood something crucial. Schools inform citizens. Whoever controls education controls which stories get told, whose experiences are validated. No more international cuisine for Mary's class. And what vision of America students inherit? Here's what our educators today, I think, are reminding us, that these aren't abstract policy debates. You might have been in Chapel Hill, you said North Carolina, and is Raleigh the capital of North Carolina? Right. You know, they weren't in Chapel Hill. The voters in Chapel Hill supported the idea of the class, but it was the elected officials in Raleigh who made the decision for the voters in Chapel Hill, and likewise in Texas. Educators about students. Let's see. They are about students who feel unsafe. Educators are about students who feel unsafe when their identities are erased. Educators are about teachers who self-censor because they fear parental complaints. Educators are about communities are experiencing, we've learned about communities that are divided by cultural war tactics and treat schools as battlegrounds instead of a sacred trust. And here's the theological claim that we must hold on to. I said it last week, I say it again. Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Christian nationalism violates the God who liberates rather than dominates. It distorts the Jesus who sided with the excluded, not the powerful. It abandons the prophetic tradition that speaks truth to power, not propaganda to it. So what we are to do are three things. One, we need to name it clearly when we see it. So we need to pay attention to it. We don't soften the language or avoid the controversy about Christian nationalism. We call it by what it is, a political movement that hijacks our faith for earthly power. Two, we are called to defend public schools as covenantal institutions that serve the common good, even as we work to make them more just, more inclusive, and more truthful. And three, we are to build solidarity with secular advocates, religious minorities, LGBTQ families, educators, and communities of colors who've been resisting this agenda long before many of us recognize the threat. The work is hard. It requires discernment to distinguish between healthy faith, presence in public life, and nationalistic coercion. It requires courage to speak when powerful forces want us to remain silent. It requires humility to recognize our own complicity in systems of privilege, but all of it is faithful work, and it is one that we do not do alone. So that is why we have this class. It is why Generation to Generation has sponsored this class. And it is the good work that I hope that we will embrace as a congregation in this calendar year before next year's session begins. May it be so. Yes, ma'am, real quick.
Just a real quick comment. This is an aha moment from all this, from the home economics. 1970s, we had the Eagle Forum, and they were fighting home economics because we were talking about families and what we might ask the students what their families were like, and they didn't want us delving into it. So all this time goes by, and now I'm going, wow, that was way back then. They were already powerful.
Yeah. Well, and home economics, I won't even talk to you about the influence of the credit card industry on how we teach home economics. That's a whole nother class I'm happy to talk about. In your handouts, there's a QR code. You do not have to do it right now, but I please invite you to please send feedback on the three questions. What stood out most today? What was something that challenged or expanded your thinking? And based on what you learned only on today, what might be one specific way in which we could move forward. Okay, next week I'm going to do show and tell, and I'm going to bring you lots of artifacts for us to take a look at and to explore how everything from last week and today, what it looks like in reality. Those 3 sources I gave you from the Christian Nationalist, you may want to go look those up your own. If you want me to email them, let me know and I'll email them to you. Let us close in our communal prayer, which is in bold on that last page. And we pray saying, loving God, we leave this place changed by what we have heard. Give us courage to act and wisdom to speak. Go with us now. Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Happy Martin Luther King Day.
Same to you.
Yes. No, stewardship. Marcelo.